morning students. The topic of today's module is socio-economic factors of agriculture. There are numerous socio, cultural, economic, political, technological and infrastructural factors which determine the agricultural land use, cropping patterns and agricultural process. Although physical factors play a major role in the agricultural land use, the social structure, tradition, beliefs of the people and long drawn practices profoundly influences the land use in a country. Economic factors help a great deal in the proper understanding of the land use for agriculture purposes. Of these factors, land tenancy, system of ownership, technological development, accessibility of the market, irrigation facilities, agricultural research and extension services, price incentives, government plans and international policies have a close impact on agricultural activities. Coming to size of the farm. There is a close relationship between the size of the farm and agricultural production. In the monsoon regions, the land holdings are small and the size is generally between 0.8 and 1.2 hectare. In India and in the countries of Southeast Asia, because of the size of the population, the area of the holding generally is 0.4 hectare or even less. The average standard size of holding that may give better agricultural returns cannot be maintained because of the fast growing rural population and the prevailing law of inheritance. The law of succession in the countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka results in the subdivision and fragmentation of holdings. According to the law of inheritance in these countries, the property of the deceased is equally divided among the male heirs. This division and subdivision results in further fragmentation of land. It is a wasteful and uneconomic method of land utilization in which improved agricultural practices cannot be adopted. In the opinion of the agricultural economists, the fragmentation of holdings is a great obstacle and one of the major deterrents to economically viable cultivation. It results in wastage of land, labor and material inputs. The division of holdings may be socially justifiable, but economically they are not viable. Land tenancy. Land tenure includes all forms of tenancy and also ownership in any form. Land tenancy and land tenure affect the agricultural operations and cropping patterns in many ways. The farmers and cultivators plan the agricultural activities and farm management keeping in mind their rights and possession duration on the land. In different communities of the world, the cultivators have different land tenancy rights. In the tribal societies of the shifting cultivators, land belongs to the community and individuals are allowed only to grow crops along with other members of the community for a specific period. But among the sedentary farmers, land belongs to individual farmers. In such societies, it is believed that one who owns land, he owns wealth. The ownership and the length of time available for planning development and management of available land influences the decision making process of the cultivator. Depending on the nature of tenancy rights, he decides the extent to which investment on land could be made. The cropping pattern and farm management are also dependent on the duration of time for which the land is to remain under cultivation. In India, at the time of independence, there were two main tenure systems, that is the zamindari and the roytwari systems. These systems determined the relations between land on the one hand and the interested parties, the governments, the owners and the cultivators on the other. In the zamindari system, the land property right were conferred upon persons who were oddly non-cultivators but had sufficient influence in the region to collect land revenue from the cultivating peasantry. This was necessary at a time when the foreign government was not firmly established and direct control of land revenue and contact with the peasants was difficult. Owing to the zamindari tenure system, the real cultivators and tillers were exploited. They were therefore not interested in making investment in the land. Cultivators who have a good deal of incentives to invest in land to improve the techniques of cultivation and to enhance productivity were discouraged. The tenant cultivators in such a system face major disincentives like the fear of evictions, the insecurity of tenure, the rack renting practice, the high rents and the inadequate surplus to invest. Coming to labor. The availability of labours is also a major constraint in the agricultural land use and cropping patterns of a region. Labours represents all human services other than decision making and capital. The availability of labour, its quantity and quality at the periods of peak labour demand have great influence on decision making process of the farmers. The labour inputs vary considerably around the year for most of the agriculture enterprises, with the result that many farmers employ a mixed system of production in order to keep their labour fully employed. Even then, in many parts of India, seasonal unemployment remains on most of the holdings, while during the peak periods of crop sowing and harvesting, there occur acute shortage of labour which influences the sowing and harvesting operations and thereby affect the decision of the farmers whether to grow or not to crop. Many of the cultivators of western Uttar Pradesh have given up the cultivation of rice owing to the non-availability of workers at the time of transplantation and harvesting. There are two basic reasons for the decline of agricultural labour, especially in the developed countries. Firstly, the industrialized nations offer alternative and financially attractive employment. Secondly, there are greater leisure opportunities for the industrial workers. In India, very few job opportunities occur outside agriculture, which leads to unemployment of agricultural landless labour and size farmers. Thus, the availability of labour has a direct impact on agricultural land use. Next factor is the capital. Capital subscribes definite limitations to the selection of crops. All agricultural inputs like the livestock, irrigation, seeds, fertilizers, insecticides, pesticides, feeding stuffs, labour, purchase of land, machinery, carts, vehicles, various agricultural equipments and maintenance require capital. All the farmers make their decisions on the basis of capital to invest. The traditional way of cultivation is giving way to the market oriented crops which need more capital for getting higher returns. In the underdeveloped countries, money lender is still the main source of finance in the remote rural areas, and he advances money to the farmers at a high rate of interest with the intention of exploitation. Moreover, the permanent investment in agricultural system like plantation put a great restriction on the selection of alternative cropping patterns. The development of irrigation facilities without capital is not possible. The role of irrigation in the areas of erratic rainfall, arid and semi-arid regions is quite significant. Its importance has substantially increased after the adoption of high yielding varieties in the developing countries. Irrigation not only enhances the yields of the crops, it also helps in the intensification and horizontal expansion of agriculture. The deserts like Nile Valley, Turkmenistan and parts of the Thar Desert have been made green, growing cotton, cereals, vegetables and citrus fruits with the help of irrigation. The development of irrigation, which is one of the primary bases of the agriculture, needs enormous amounts of capital. Next is the mechanization and equipments. The technological changes, including the use of modern hand tools, animals drawn implements, tractors, thrashers and more economic patterns of farm management, play a vital role in the selection of crops grown and decision making at the farm level. These changes help in improving the crop yields. The improvements occur partially from the use of more effective equipment, but also because mechanization makes it possible to carry out farming operations more quickly and at the precise time calculated to maximize outputs. In the plains of the Punjab and western Uttar Pradesh, for example, the increasing substitutions of tractors for bullocks has greatly shortened the time the farmer has to spend on the plowing and sowing of the kharif and rabi crops. This enables the farmers to cultivate their fallow land before it becomes infested with weeds in the summer season, a practice which was not feasible when oxen drawn plough was used. The result was a substantial diminution of weeds and increased cereal crop yields. In China, simple machines constructed mostly of bamboo, wood and few metal parts have been in use since 1958. The machines under normal conditions do 20 times the amount of work of the hand planter, thus greatly shortening the time needed to plant the rice crop. The deployment of such machines is especially important for areas with 2 or more than 2 crops a year. The improved tools and farm implements can change appreciably the cropping patterns, cropping intensity and crop combinations, resulting into high agricultural returns. Next factor is the transportation facilities. Transportation facilities also have a direct bearing on the cropping patterns of a region. Better transport linkages are advantageous because of the economics in the farm labor and storage cost which they make possible. These savings in turn helps to make it economic for farmers to buy fertilizers and better equipments. Better transport also makes it possible for farmers to put their less accessible land to more productive use. In areas inadequately served by the modern means of transportation, the surplus produce is often damaged either by adverse weather or by rats, pests and diseases. In the hilly states of northeast India, costly crops like ginger, pineapple and banana are grown in surplus quantities, but the poor means of transportation and inadequate road linkages deprive the cultivators of most of the profits. Contrary to this, in the United States, the truck farming is done at distant places from the big cities and markets, as the farmer is able to supply his perishable crops to the distant markets within a short period of time at a reasonable rate of transportation. Next is the marketing facilities. The accessibility to the market is a major consideration in the decision making of the farmer. The intensity of agriculture and the production of crops decline as the location of cultivation get away from the marketing centers. This is particularly noticeable when a bulky but low value crop has to be transported to the market. If it takes much time to send the produce, especially at the peak time, to the market when the farmer could have been profitably employed in the other activities. The marketing system also influences the decision making of the farmer. In most of the countries, the agricultural commodity markets are controlled by the buyers rather than the sellers. The farmers, however, can influence the market by storing their products on the farm or in cold storages until prices are remunerative. But since the number of buyers is lesser than the number of sellers and the cultivator is not financially well off to store the crop, the bargaining position of the farmer remains weak. The fluctuations in prices of agricultural produce many a times compel the farmers to change the cropping patterns. The purchase of foodstuff is of great importance. Traders who buy cereals from petty cultivators pay them much less than the prevailing price. Often the payment is not correct and the cultivator also does not have the right information of the prevailing rate in the market. Although the government has framed rates for the purchase and sale of agricultural produce, the difficulty in the implementation of these rules is that all types of cereals do not fall under the purview of these rules. Moreover, about 50% of the foodstuff in the villages are purchased by the traders from the cultivators personally. The entire benefit of these rules can be had only when the cultivator is free from the trader loans. In fact, the societies giving agricultural lands and the societies making purchase and sale of food grains should work in union. A recent development is the establishment of the Prices and Cost Commission. Before the sowing season of cereals starts, the government announces the price at which it shall procure cereals from the cultivators. This has produced a very restorative effect on the economic conditions of the cultivators. The payment of the procured food grains is made and cultivator is paid cash on the spot. A positive measure undertaken by the government is the introduction of the public distribution system to alleviate poverty, in which those below the poverty line are provided with food grains at subsidized rates through about 4,000 fair price shops spread all over the country. Coming to the government policies. The agricultural land use and cropping patterns are also influenced by the government policies. The fluctuations in the price of sugarcane, wheat, oilseeds and legumes provide impetus or disincentives to the cultivators to grow these crops. Under certain political conditions, the government may stop the farmers to grow certain crops. In the socialistic countries like Russia, Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Cuba, etc., the combination of crops, their rotation, a real strength and mode of disposal are completely controlled by the governments. In democratic countries like India, the government announces the price of various cereals and cash crops well in advance so that the farmers may devote their agricultural lands to different suitable cereals and other money fetching crops. Apart from the domestic policies, the government enter into international agreements to supply certain agricultural commodities to each other in order to maintain the balance of trade. The British government imports a substantial quantity of dairy products from New Zealand and Australia. Canada and Argentina export wheat while Cuba, Indonesia and India are the exporter of sugar. These international agreements have a close bearing on the cropping patterns of different countries. Comprehensive crop insurance scheme was introduced by the government of India from the start of Kharif season in 1985. The scheme applies to all farmers securing loans from commercial, cooperative and rural banks for the cultivation of rice, wheat, millet, oilseeds and pulses. The sum insured has been reduced from 150% to 10% of crop loans subjected to a maximum of Rs 10,000 per farmer. Next is the religion. The religion of the cultivator has also influenced the agricultural activities in the different parts of the world. Each of the major religions has certain taboos and the use of certain agricultural commodities is prohibited in each of them. The socio-economic and political cultural factors, especially land tenancy, land ownership, size of holdings, fragmentation of fields, availability of labor, capital and accessibility to the market, storage facilities, government policies, international agreements and religion of the cultivators substantially influences the agricultural patterns and agricultural land use of a region. In the Asian and African countries, these factors play a major role. In the South Asian countries, agriculture as an occupation comes to a person from the family and is an integral part of one's cultural life. Similarly, the religious beliefs also influence the agricultural scenario. In India, cow is considered a religious animal and in the Indian agricultural framework, the number of cattle is very high. One of the greatest advantages of this aspect is that the lands get raw manure easily in great quantities and perhaps this is one of the reasons why the fertility of the soil is still maintained despite crop cultivation spanning several decades. However, in the case of rising population, the excessive number of cattle, particularly the number of those which are not useful, are a cause of worry. In Malaysia, Christians rear pigs in the vegetable fields and derive many benefits from their trade, while the Muslims they dislike rearing of pigs because of religious reasons. The inhabitants of Celebes after harvesting rice do not raise maize or any other crop because it is considered a religious crime, and so they leave the land fallow after the harvest of rice. Among the tribal herdsmen of Africa, there is a particular tradition that profoundly influences the land use. It is a matter of great honor for them if the number of cattle is large. The greater the number of cattle with a tribal, the greater is the respect in the society, and they think that in days of scarcity, the animals serve as a premium, and during marriages, the animals can be sold easily and money can be raised for marriage. On the other hand, land cannot sustain these animals, and after the land is overgrazed, soil erosion takes place. The animals are lean and poor in health, and the agricultural production of the land also declines. The socio-economic and politico-cultural factors, especially land tenancy, land ownership, size of holdings, fragmentation of fields, availability of labor, capital, accessibility to the market, storage facilities, government policies, international agreements and religion of the cultivators substantially influence the agricultural pattern and agricultural land use of a region.